This is KUGAN CASSIUS for iFL TV in association with MGM Marbella. We're at the Matchroom HQ here for our annual, it's not annual, is it?
Bi-monthly?
Hey. Sounds a bit kinky. Q&A session with Eddie Hearn. How are you, Eddie?
I'm very well. I'm very excited. I don't think I've ever had this much going on at any one time in terms of our boxers. Obviously, a disappointing weekend last week with Paul Smith, but yet a weekend that has just completely transformed his career, really, even with a loss. So we got that. We've obviously got the Bellew Cleverly Pressed Tour tomorrow, which I'm really excited about, something that's not been done before, the 2-city tour in a day over here. Big announcements coming for that show as well. Leeds on Saturday's virtually sold out. O2 is virtually sold out the week after. Hull is virtually sold out. We're absolutely flying, and now I get a chance to answer people's questions, for you to have a right pop, and for me to give the truth.
Okay.
The whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Okay.
Sorry if you don't like what you hear, but I'm just going to be up front there.
Now, as always, the quicker you answer, the more we can get through.
Okay.
So,
normally I start I go into too much detail.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and be a little bit more blunt. But when there's an interesting question,
yeah,
I will try and expand a little bit.
Okay.
And we're doing tickets for O2.
O2.
Okay.
Have you got a pen?
No, you always ask me this. How can you not have a pen?
All right, don't worry.
You can just say it, and then you know.
All right, I'll watch it back.
I wasn't, and we're virtually sold out of the O2, so.
And you got a Fox Groves pen?
Might be one in the box somewhere. But.
Right, let's go. Right, the only reason this question's in, it wasn't a particularly great question, but it was the first one, and I just imagine that person waiting and waiting until...
I've got a really good recollection of people's Twitter names, so what was their Twitter name?
Sam Riley.
Never heard of him.
Sorry, Sam.
No, I don't know, it doesn't ring any bells.
All right, but what is the funniest thing you've ever seen in a boxing ring?
One thing that makes me laugh quite a lot is when a fighter goes back to the wrong corner after the round.
Who's done that?
Paul McCloskey did it in his fight, and Madonna did it recently. Didn't you see? Maybe
yeah.
And then Rabras did it against Groves as well. He just bowled back to the neutral corner and sort of goes to sit down on the stool and it's not there. And all his corner team are going, over here, mate. That always makes me laugh. Someone told me a funny story this morning of a guy called Phil Sutcliffe, who's an Irish promoter manager, was in the corner in the Tim Sweeney fight, and he went out and bought a brand new suit for the occasion. He's quite sort of a extrovert character, and when I think it was Sweeney drunk his water bottle and spat down to the bowl and missed him completely all over the geezer's suit, and he had a full on tiff to the fighter about his suit. Do you know what I mean? In the middle of the break of the round.
His own fighter?
Yeah. Sounded quite amusing. And a lot of these stories that I'm telling you seem to be those sort of moments where you have to be there. So we'll move on to the next question.
Alright, thanks Sam for that.
Cheers, Sam.
Right. Albert Venus.
Actually, going back, the funniest thing was probably me going in the ring too early against Bute.
Yeah.
Yeah, Albert Venus.
Albert Venus. What have you booked for Wembley in June? Don't lie, we want answers.
Haven't booked anything. They've got 2 dates, which is June the 27th and July the 4th. They're the only 3 dates available. They want to make sure that we do all the boxing at Wembley, and they're the dates they can offer us for this year. We've penciled both dates, and that's about as far as we've got at the moment.
Okay. So you didn't have a fight?
No, I mean Brooke Khan, Froch. I mean, I want to do a show at Wembley this year, and they're the 2 dates that are available to do so.
Okay.
Which we've held.
Mark Phillips, have you spoke to Keller about the rematch with Abraham and how likely in the UK? Also, what will the WBO do about it in regards to scoring? What actions are you taking? Okay.
Firstly, you have to file a petition or an appeal letter to the WBO, which went yesterday to Paco and the team there at the WBO. I've spoken to Keller non-stop because we're speaking on half a dozen things happening in the boxing world at the moment that we're working on. They're very keen to make the rematch. We believe Paul Smith should be installed as the mandatory challenger and given a rematch against... Because it was a voluntary challenge, it's difficult to be granted an immediate rematch, if you know what I mean, because obviously Paul was given the chance for the Abraham fight. If he's made mandatory challenger, it gives them really the right to say, right, he's your mandatory challenger, you have to fight him. We believe, based on that performance, that he deserves to be the mandatory challenger. Virtually impossible to get him to the UK. We'll talk numbers, but Arthur Abraham is quite happy to box in Germany. I don't think he really wants to go to Liverpool unless we can pull something audacious out of the bag, which is going to be difficult, but we'll have a look. The WBO are reviewing everything. I think they've already commented that this judging was poor. I think we've got a great chance. But regardless of that, I'm confident that Kell will make the rematch with us for Paul Smith. And you can put the pressure on yourself at Sowland Bros on Twitter. But I think, I think Abraham believes he can beat Smith again. And I think he'd be happy to take the rematch if it made sense and there was the demand, which I think the response from even the Twitter world is showing that there is the demand.
Okay. Joe Cole. Not Cole. Eddie, do you think that referees should be interviewed after a live fight? For example, if there is a premature stoppage, why do they always get away with it but not answering to the public what they did and why?
I think it's like an unwritten rule, isn't it, with officials, that they don't get access to the media. Isn't it the same in football as well? I don't think that, like, if in football a referee or an official gives a bad result, they're not allowed or permitted to give interviews. And that's the same with the British Boxing Board of Control. The officials aren't allowed to comment on their performance, stuff like that. I remember with Howard Foster, it's just a code that they sign up to. They're not allowed. I think the board protect them from giving comments about their performance. And I think that's quite standard throughout sport. Might be wrong. Do I think that's right or wrong? I think in the instance of, say, Howard Foster, I think actually it might have been to his benefit to sit down in an interview and say, listen, I have to be honest, this is what I saw in the fight and this is why I stopped the fight. Because I think it would have made people potentially understand more why he did it. But I think it's an unwritten code that they don't.
Okay. Farhan Ishmael. See, you put Cleverly Bellew on November 22nd. Clearly your bottle went from going up against Frank Warren's show on the 29th. Sensible move for the fans, but you bottled it, son. LMFAO.
You can't really win, can you? I mean, I'm being asked to change a date because it suits the fans, and then when I do, I've bottled it. I mean, the fact is very simple. Our show will sell out. We originally planned for November 29th, booked it, and then they announced a show. They actually moved it from the 22nd to the 29th. So, again, it's commercially beneficial for us to have a show on the 22nd rather than the 29th. With that show, we're going to get more viewers. We're going to sell out in a couple of hours anyway, when we go on sale tomorrow. But I just thought that's what people would have liked. So
you did the right thing.
Yeah, but I just thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Others wouldn't have done it because they think, no, I'm not moving. I ain't moving. This is my plot. Do you know what I mean? I was here first. I couldn't give a monkeys. I want to make more money and I want to make sure more people get to watch it.
Okay. Kondai Matuhono.
I bet he's Team Khan, that last geezer, as well.
Don't know. I'm not sure. Kondai Matu Hornell. Eddie, it seems as though your head is so far up Frotch's arse, you will probably end up fucking James DeGale's future in the process, i.e. match him to get him beat, then fuck him off. Should have got DeGale a better route than the IBF.
What a plum this geezer is. I mean, what a plum. I mean, firstly, he was supposed mandatory for the WBC, which just wouldn't have happened, right? This way, with the IBF, he gets a chance to be the actual mandatory challenger for Carl Froch. The fact that Carl Froch is mandatory is not yet due. He's not all of a sudden something crazy that's just, happened in the boxing world. That's fact. The fact is that Carl Froch has to fight James DeGale, and there's time frames in which he has to do so. So DeGale's in a great spot. He's actually going to box in Liverpool. And as far as my head being up Carl Froch's arse is concerned, he's a mate of mine, he's a client, he's a great fighter. He's also the biggest fighter in the UK. It's quite important that I've got a good relationship with him. James DeGale will get his shot, and if he's good enough, he will beat James DeGale, and good luck to him. Got a lot of time for James DeGale. Good man, good fighter. End of story.
You mean if he's good enough, he'll beat Carl Froch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, He boxed at Wembley, huge platform. He was boxing in front of about 500 people in shopping centres. Next up, he's boxing in front of 80,000 in a final eliminator. He's going to get a huge domestic fight. And that geezer plum.
Condai, who's heard it first.
Nice one, Condai.
Mark Deacon. Hi Eddie. We have 6 VIP tickets for the Leeds card this Saturday, even laid on a limo for the occasion.
Oh, yeah?
Big up, Mark. My question is, do you plan on bringing more shows to Leeds next year?
Absolutely. Well, Josh Warrington's got to win first on Saturday. I mean, if Josh Warrington becomes the British, Commonwealth and European champion, he's the biggest ticket seller in the country I've seen, by a mile.
I heard how many tickets he sold.
Yeah,
It's
done like
incredible.
2,000 tickets. That's on his own. I'm not talking about box office sales. We'll have 6,000 in there. It'll be sold out. But I'm talking about him personally. So, answer, we'll be back in Leeds, sharpish, probably around February time.
Okay. Ryan Barston. Macklin versus Lee at the O2 in Dublin this year?
Not this year. Andy Lee's in a strange position because, you know, with everything happening with Billy Joe Saunders, he could actually end up in an eliminator for that world title. I want to make Macklin Lee. Macklin will fight Highland on November the
Who's going
15th
to
at the O2. We haven't announced that yet, but as always, I announce on your videos. And then we're looking for that Lee fight or a world title fight for Macklin. You know, he was back in action at the weekend, looked quite rugged, ain't boxed for 10 months. So he's got that out of his system, he's ready to fight Highland. It's a really, really tough fight.
Aaron, no surname on this one. Did Team Khan really turn down a multi-million offer from you to face Kell Brook earlier this year when he fought Collazo instead?
Yes, $5 million.
Did you make an actual offer?
Yes, to Richard Schaefer.
Verbally or
In writing.
in writing?
Happy to show you.
Okay.
I've got the emails to prove it.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, it's, you know,
Yeah.
that was before Kell was world champion.
Yeah.
So I think if Khan loses to Kell Brook, it's virtually career over. I think that's what he's afraid of. I'm not saying it's a gimme. I just believe Kell Brook's going to win. I'm not saying Amir Khan's scared of Kell Brook. I'm just saying that if he lost to Kell, before was even worse, losing to him with no title. But the fight is huge, biggest payday for both fighters. Let's make it happen. Blah blah blah. How many times do I have to say it?
El Nando.
Nando's.
Nando's.
This is a good question. He gets the first ticket.
El Nando. I quite like this question. Will Eddie admit, in brackets, yes or no, that none of the governing bodies actually see Scott Quigg as the best in his division? This is surely what the definition of a world champion should be. If all sanctioning bodies adopted this idea and we have 8 world champions per division, utter madness and would lead to domestic level fights being for world titles. Also, it leads to a super champion and a regular champion avoiding each other, i.e. Frochward, Quigg, Regondo. How can Eddie always go on about wanting to make big fights happen? I'm actually thinking the reason Eddie supports this is that it allows him to label domestic fights as world title fights.
Right, well, we can't have a ticket because it was a really weird question. Firstly, what domestic fight have I made that just for the WBA regular title that is for that I can call as a world title fight? The answer is none. Froch Groves was for the IBF, it's IBF mandatory.
Yeah.
Have I ever made Quigg in a domestic fight? No. Have I made McDonnell in a domestic fight? No. Am I looking to on November 22nd? No. So that's wrong. The first thing is I don't make the rules. If the WBA want to make a super champion when there's a unified champ, okay, and the world championship, the world title becomes vacant, it's not for me to say, oh, that's not a world title, because it is. It is a world title. You can have different opinions on how you feel about that world title, but it is a world title. Is Rigondeaux better than Quigg? Yes. You know, I mean, but he is a unified champ. Now, the reason they've made the super champ and the regular champ is that when you have a unified champ, sometimes it's harder for those fighters to be in so many fights because they're fighting across divisions for other belts. Sometimes they'll fight once or twice a year. I know why the WBA have done it. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's wrong. That's your opinion. But Quigg is a world champion. You know, and I'm not doing it to make domestic fights because I'm not making any domestic fights. So I've forgotten what the other questions are. Oh, they're not being forced to fight them. No, because the WBA quite like the fact that these titles are being active, and that's why they've made a regular champion, because the super champions aren't as active. A la Rigondale, a la, best example, Andre Ward. You know, if Andre Ward was the only WBA champion, the belt would be like in gridlock. He hasn't fought for he's had like one fight in 2 years. You know, Froch has been actively defending that WBA regular title, and by the way, he won it off Mikhail Kessler. Come on. You know, I think it's more about the quality of the fights. Sometimes those regular belt fights aren't good enough. We need to make sure they are and have the credibility. But I feel for Scott Quigg a little bit, because that is a genuine world title. It's just the strength of it is up to you to determine. But he is a world champion, whether you like it or not.
Carl Fisman. Eddie, have you spoken to David Hay on his comeback, and will he fight on Sky?
I spoke to him just via text about 2 or 3 weeks ago, just asking what was going on. He said he's back, floating around early October. We'll have a chat. That's about it. I've heard rumours that he's signing with Al Heyman, etc. Happy to work with Al Heyman. I would guess at some point we'll have a conversation, but that's about it.
Okay. Harry Archer. If you can't get Paul Smith a world title shot again, what about the Rocky Fielding fight? And if not, what for Rocky? He should be due a world title shot soon, in my opinion.
Well, firstly, I'm pretty confident that Paul Smith will get another world title shot. Again, you know, the Abraham fight is being discussed at length already with Keller, and we've got to wait and see the WBO's decision. I'm also talking to Anthony Durrell's camp about a WBC shot. I think he's a prime candidate for that as well. It's another exclusive for you that I was going to talk about tomorrow at the press conference. In terms of Rocky Fielding, I don't think Rocky warrants a world title shot yet, but he's already right up there in the IBF rankings. A great performance against Noe Gonzalez. He's just had an operation on his hand. He'll probably be back sort of February, March time. So that's the news with him. Again, one day I think Paul Smith against Rocky Fielding is a big fight, and indeed potentially Callum Smith against Rocky Fielding.
Anthony Sassman. Eddie, would you ever fight Francis Warren in a charity bout with Barry in your corner and Frank in Francis' corner? Would be great. IFL could film this.
Yeah, why not? I think I'm a bit big for Francis, though. I'm carrying a bit of weight. He looks like he's trimmed down. I think he's probably giving away about 4 stone. But for charity, yeah, why not?
You'd be up for that?
Yeah, of course.
I'll start instigating this. John Amos Phillips. Eddie, sad to hear about the passing away of Dan Goosen. I hope this is not appropriate, but how does this affect Andre Ward? Sorry if I'm being insensitive.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a few people talking about that on Twitter last night, you know, and obviously the answer is I don't know. I mean, they've obviously had a dispute over time and looked like no one was giving any ground. I would think that the contract is with Goosen Tutor, the company, rather than Dan Goosen individually. I don't really know, and I don't feel right sort of talking about it, you know. I mean, I worked with Dan on Froch Ward, and he's a real character, you know. Like, I was still probably a little bit of a rookie then. It was quite a long time ago, and he sort of, you know, took me under my wing. He had a lot of time talking about deals he's done and time he spent with my dad, and had a funny old dress sense, you know. Wore some really loud blazers. Do you remember we had him here at the head office? Probably. And it was a shock because obviously I think it was quite a quick illness as well. So, you know, thoughts with his family, but a real character in the boxing world. I was actually looking at some pictures last night that people were posting of him like in the 60s and 70s with fighters, and he was wearing like a vest with like a chain, you know, looked like Danny Zuko out of Greece. He's been around a long time. Very knowledgeable guy. There was
about 30 questions Ward, Dan Goosen related, yeah. So I thought I would ask you one of them. David Leadbelly. Eddie, with so many complaints, especially over the weekend, about the Sky commentary team and their biasness, do you think it's time for a complete change? Out with the old?
I don't think it's a case. I mean, biasness to who? Like, you know, one minute they're getting accused of biasness to a Matchroom or a Sky fighter, And the next, I thought they were very, very over complimentary to Sean Porter in the Kell Brook fight. I thought they were very, very over complimentary to George Groves in the first fight. So I don't think it's like the scoring. I think sometimes it's not about sort of a biasness or a corruptness. It's just sometimes people have a bad night and get it wrong. I'm sure Jim Watt often gets it wrong. I haven't heard that much about bad commentary from the Smith-Abraham fight. I haven't actually watched it back with commentary. But I know Jim Watt had it up by pull up by 2 rounds. But Jim Watt's a very, very good commentator. He's been around a long, long time. I think Nick Hawley's doing a good job. Is it time to freshen it up? I mean, it's not a decision for me. People sometimes think I run Sky. I don't. I just promote fights on their channel. So their production team calls the shots in that respect, and I think they've got a good commentary team.
Stephen Andrews.
I will tell you one thing though.
Yeah.
Jim Watt does find it quite funny, all the Twitter stuff, because every now and again I show him like the Jim Watt bingo and stuff like that, and he's just sort of laughing.
I think, to be honest, just to go back to that, I think that what I was gathering the idea from is that people think that their commentary leads the casual fan into believing one thing, like as if there's some sort of agenda. Which
no, there's definitely no agenda, but I agree with your point.
Yeah.
If you're watching the fight as I'm a casual fan, he's saying that people get wound up about, but as sort of just a fan, and you're listening to this guy saying good round to Paul Swift and this is my scorecard, you're automatically going to think, very rarely, oh Jim, you're wrong there, I've got a totally different card. Most people go with the flow of what they're being told, so if it's not an agenda, I mean, it doesn't but there's no benefit to commentate like that or in that way.
Stephen Andrews. Warren said in an iFL video that people slagged Bellew Cleverly off 3 years ago when he put it on for a world title. You suddenly put on the rematch with no title, and it's the best thing since sliced fucking bread. Joke.
Okay. Firstly, I didn't say it was the best thing since sliced bread. It's just a wonderful fight. Number one, when they fought 3 years ago, both of them had a very low profile. I think Bellew had 14, 15 fights, something like that. At that time and at that level, I likened it to a British and Commonwealth title fight, European title fight, rather than a world title fight. Completely stick by my guns. Since then, and another reason is because the first fight was so good, the rivalry has grown. Both fighters have grown in profile, particularly Tony Bellew, because he's been on Sky. Nathan's been on Sky a couple of times since. Both, obviously Nathan lost his world title. Tony fought in a big high profile fight. The rivalry's grown. The fights got bigger and bigger. The profiles have got bigger and bigger. Therefore, it's a much bigger fight on a bigger platform. Quite simple. The first fight, I don't think it even sold out. This fight's going to sell out in about 2 hours. How can you not say it's a bigger fight? Of course it is. I'm not saying it's the greatest fight of all time. It's just a very, very good fight with loads of hype and loads of fun.
Absolutely. Ahmed Khan. Sorry, this made me laugh. Eddie, your boy Brook is overhyped.
Team Khan.
No.
Is he?
Let me read this. Your boy Brook is overhyped. Pubic ball bag. If you had a chance to sign Khan and lose Brook, would you do it now, considering Khan is a much bigger draw in the US? Peace.
The answer, and I tell you 100% honestly, is no. Because I'm quite close to Kell Brook, and he's been in my little project, and I believe he's going to go and sweep up the whole division. Amir Khan, bigger profile, bigger name at the moment. No belt, by the way, but still. But I wouldn't give up what I've built with Kell Brook, because I believe he's a wonderful fighter and he's going to go on to do great things. And when is he going to get respect? He's gone over to America and beaten this guy that everyone is claiming to be this new force in the welterweight division. He schooled him. What else you got to do?
Pubic ball bag. Sort yourself out, mate. Ahmed. Sydney Horsley, Eddie.
Amir Khan fans hate Kell Brook so bad. All 7 of them.
Today? Oh, it's all good fun. Sydney Horsley, Eddie, would you encourage Sky to take Huck Nelson for TV? Would you entertain it?
You can give him a ticket for that. It's like this thing, you know. I spoke to Johnny, and I just don't think. I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't sit right with me. I don't know. Don't know what you think, but you know, Johnny would have to get a licence first with British Boxing Board of Control. Then the WBO would have to approve it. I can't see them just approving a fight with a guy that's been out for 9 years. And when you've been out of the game for 9 years, you're just not the same physically. And I was talking to Huck at the weekend. He's a big dude and he can punch. So listen, if Johnny's got aspirations to fight again, then you know he's a great guy, and I'm sure people will be interested to see it. But I'm just not so sure.
Okay. Simon Evans, you go on about all this co-promotion shit with Frampton, but fact is you worked with Haymaker and Sowland to co-promote. Talk out your arse sometimes, Eddie.
No, not really, because the reason I didn't want to co-promote with Barry McGuigan is because he was the manager. And I didn't want to co-promote with a manager because there's such huge conflict of interest. I've said this before 100 times. A promoter's job, essentially, is to develop the career of the fighter, but to be brutally honest, is probably to try and get the fighter's purse as low as possible so they can make some money. The manager's obligation is trying to get the fighter's purse as high as possible. If you're doing both, it's a complete conflict of interest. I wasn't prepared after the work I put in with Frampton to co-promote on that basis. David Hay comes up to me and says, Eddie, I want to be with you. Blimey, how can I turn that down? Slightly different levels. Do you know what I mean?
Because there's a promotion. He obviously promotes himself.
Yeah, he promotes himself. Eddie, you know, more about the broadcast side, get me on Sky, and you know.
Yeah.
But with Frampton, I'd built him, you know, and I'd worked with Barry. I was happy to do so, but I didn't want the manager promoting, taking there. You know, it just didn't feel right. Of course, I'm not co-promoting with Al Heyman. I'm not co-promoting with Al Heyman. But if you're watching now, got my number, son. But you know, I wasn't happy with that particular scenario.
Okay. Mark Eisterberg, why did you choose to work with George Groves, where he clearly has a dislike against you since Froch Groves? Just going by certain things he says in interviews, I may be completely wrong.
That's a definite ticket question. George Groves doesn't like me. I think he's made that quite clear. It was a very interesting situation. Obviously, we've got all the dates with Sky. George Groves couldn't have possibly got on Sky without me. And Calla approached me and said, would you put George Groves on Sky? I thought, I don't know. Because I used to have quite a good relationship with George Groves, but obviously, you know, when the Froch fight happened, the first fight, his contract expired in September, and the fight was in November. I didn't want to talk about a new contract with him. I felt that he'd want to remain on Sky, so we didn't do anything. Then he got beat, and then obviously the rematch was there. Then we talked a little bit. Then when the rematch was made, there was so much animosity, I thought, listen, I'm going to have to go one way or the other. I'm going to back Carl Froch. He's my man. George, I don't think liked that either. Went off, signed with Sowland, no problem at all. Got knocked out. Came back, spoke to Sky direct. Sky said, can't do anything. Eddie's got all the dates. Eddie, could you put him on? My conversation with Sky, would you like him on? Oh yeah, it'd be good, but it's your call. So we looked at the financials and the dynamics, and I won't go too much into that, but I like Calla. I like working with Calla. I don't personally mind George. And it worked for me. It worked for me financially. It worked for me getting my fighters out on the undercard. And it worked for me delivering ratings. So sometimes, and I go on about this a lot, you have to make decisions that aren't based on ego. If I would have turned around and gone, no, George Groves, I'm not letting you on Sky. I don't like you very much. You know, I wouldn't have delivered for my broadcaster. I wouldn't have delivered good ratings. I wouldn't have got my fighters out, and I wouldn't have made a few quid. So I think the dislike generally comes from him more than me. But I don't have to like someone to work with him, and vice versa. And if he wants to box on Sky again, I'm happy to look at it.
Callum Manukian. Tyson Fury. Is Tyson Fury good for or bad for boxing, and how comes you've never tried to sign him?
Yeah, you can have a question for that. I think the Tyson Fury debate is very interesting. I really like Tyson Fury. Like, he slagged me off a few times on Twitter, but when I met him the first time at the Hey Fury press conference, he was a gentleman and we had a good chat, and I think he's a nice bloke and I think he's got a good sense of humour. Sometimes he says silly things and he goes off the ball a lot of the time, but I don't mean this disrespectfully, he's young. You know, he's not been, you know, he's still a kid, really. And again, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but, and also you have to think of the frustration that he's had in his career. 2 David Haye fights that would have made him an absolute fortune falling through. Then the Chisora fight falling through at late notice. So I can understand why he gets frustrated, but I'm more along the lines of thinking that these guys, these fighters in the limelight, are role models for younger kids, and I think they've got a code of conduct to follow and an example to set for young children. Whether they do or not, that's just what I think. So I think that he needs to be managed better, and I think that he needs to be taught what he can and can't say without losing his edge, because that's what makes him so special. He's really funny, you know, he can even sing, but he's entertaining and people like to listen to him. And then sometimes he oversteps the mark, where a respectable broadcaster might turn around and say, listen, we just can't have that, you know. But I think he's got a big future in the sport, and I think he's a very good fighter.
Richard Malia. I know this Richard, actually. Nice fella. Eddie, I met you at the BBC 5 Live event just after Haye and Chisora and had their altercation in Munich. I asked you if you thought there were too many belts in boxing. You told me that in 5 years world title belts would be irrelevant. Since then, you seem to have embraced the idea of silver belts, intercontinental belts, interim belts, etc. Is this because you feel they are of a benefit to the sport, or is it because you realise it's impossible to operate in the boxing business without conforming to the wishes of the sanctioning bodies? Have you, to an extent, become part of the problem in belt proliferation?
Good question. 2 tickets. I understand what you're saying.
What is that word?
Proliferation.
Do you know what that means?
Not really. I think he's talking about the profile of the belts.
Yeah.
And so the answer is I stand by my quote that in time the belts will mean less and less in big fights. And I think Froch Groves is a good example. 2 belts on the line. Did we need a belt? You know, Bellew against Cleverly. Do we need a belt now? Not really. On the Intercontinental and the silver belts, that's more about developing fighters. It's about letting them box in championship surroundings, championship environments, and helping them progress up governing bodies. Silver belts particularly, it's kind of like an interim belt, but it's a good belt to win. Not a world title, I'm not saying it's a world title, but it's great for the fighters, it's great for the fighters' profile, but also it sort of gives them a championship feel. It doesn't really do a lot for us because they cost money. Do you know what I mean? It's not really beneficial for me to have an intercontinental champion or an international champion. 1, it's always great to have a decent title strapped to a fight, but 2, it's about developing the fighters. The fighters love it, can increase their profile a little bit, but more importantly, it moves them in the right direction up the governing bodies. Financially, it's not great, but there is a plan behind those. I still stand by what I say. I think the fight's big enough, the belts become less important.
Okay.
But there can be not much of a fight for a world title, and it means a lot more than it did if there wasn't a world title. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does this bloke slag me off?
No.
Alright. Yeah.
Anna Farway. Me and my friends are debating, can you clear up who has a bigger penis, Froch or Joshua? Thanks, Eddie, would love tickets.
I can't give her a ticket. I actually wouldn't know. Not seen those chaps in the shower.
It's a genuine question from a woman.
I don't know. You got to think that Joshua's packing, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? But no, I've not had the pleasure of sharing a shower with them or seen them in that environment, so
Sorry,
couldn't
Anne.
tell you. You have to use your imagination, Anne. I'm sure you do already.
Sorry. There's two questions here about Ricky Burns, so I'm going to
Okay.
read both questions to you and you can sort of get into one. Josh McDonald and Greg Johnson. This is Josh McDonald. Eddie, do you think that you have ruined Ricky Burns' career since he joined Matchroom, put him in with fighters he wasn't good enough to beat, and ultimately killed Scottish boxing at the same time? That was one question from Josh McDonald. Greg Johnson, this is completely different, so don't think. What's your thoughts on a Ricky Burns headlining fight to be staged in a city or Scotland, but apart from Glasgow, to strengthen his fan base? Fight at the Aberdeen Exhibition Centre, for instance. That's from Greg Johnson, so don't confuse the two.
So the first question,
Josh McDonald.
yeah, I'd have to say, when I took Ricky Burns, he had a mandatory defence that he had to make, which was against Jose Gonzalez. He had to fight him. It wasn't a match that I made. It was his mandatory challenger. He won that. He didn't look very good in winning, but he ground it out. He got the win. In the second fight, he fought Raimundo Beltran. Voluntary defence, tough fight, but a good fight. Sold well. Got his jaw broken in the second round. Had to come for a really tough fight. Got a draw. Lucky to get a draw. Because of the time he was out injured, we lobbied actually. We tried to push for that rematch. But because of the fact that he hadn't had so many mandatories over a certain period, and because he was out for a long time of his draw, Terence Crawford was made the mandatory. He made good money for that fight. Ricky, it's a very, very tough fight. It's like people were saying that I matched him too tough, yet people were calling for all these unification fights. So if you don't think that Ricky was good enough to win those fights, he definitely wouldn't have won the unification fights. The fact is, he was poor against Gonzalez. He got his jaw broken against Beltran. He was beaten by a very good fighter in Crawford. And then he had a really disappointing loss last time out. So, in answer to your question, no. He's boxed 4 times in, I think, 14 months. He's been very active. And now we move to light welterweight. And we go again. Up at 10 stone, he'll fight in Leeds this weekend. He's still got the desire, as much desire as he's ever had. We spoke to nutritionists who believed that he just couldn't make 9 stone, 9 anymore, and that was a big problem in the last fight. So we'll see what happens. In terms of him headlining, I need to get him back on the road, get him back in a position to take a big fight, to headline back in Scotland. But I plan to do that in November, December, and if I can't, it'll be January, February. But he will be back in Scotland, as will Scottish boxing. And I get a lot of stick. Why are you putting Burns, Brophy and Simmons on in Leeds? I don't really want to. It's costing me a lot of money. But I'm developing those fighters. I can't just say, sorry, Scottish boxing's over, I'll see you in 6 months. I'm putting them out. I'm developing them as fighters. So I'm still here. I'm still helping. And we will be back in Scotland.
Okay.
And there's a lot of good young kids coming through. You know, Johan, Charlie Flynn, Josh Taylor, some really good Scottish kids.
Absolutely. Greg Marshall, what does Eddie think of the Eubank Saunders situation, and why don't Eubank want it?
I think, firstly it's a farce and it's a complete shambles, the whole thing. So you come out and you announce a fight that isn't signed, and you go on sale and you sell tickets and you print posters. This rubbish about we didn't announce it, the EBU, it's all over Frank Warren's Twitter, it's on posters, it's just wrong. Why didn't Eubank want it? Probably because the terms weren't good enough, or there was something within the offer that they weren't happy with. And I see people on Twitter go, Eubank, you pussy, sign the fight, what's the matter with you? It's like, no, he'll sign the fight when he's happy with the deal. But until then, you don't sign the fight, and you certainly don't announce it and get tickets on sale. So now they're probably desperately trying to make the fight. It's probably going to cost them even more money to make the fight. But it's just this keenness. Get it out there, sign it, announce. Why? It's not done. It's not. I don't know what's the matter with these fighters not signing these contracts. Well, they've got a right to not sign a contract. It's a very good fight. Eubank should be on a lot of money for that fight. So should Billy Joe. And it's a tough fight. It's a gamble at that stage in his career. So the terms have got to be right. Simple. That's what I think. I think it's a great fight, by the way.
Ryan Moore, I'm gathering this is a choice question. Kell Brook to get his chance against Mayweather, or Froch to avenge his defeat against Andre Ward?
I'd love to see Brook Mayweather. You know, the Froch Ward fight, it doesn't. I don't know. Just it's a really tough fight, and stylistically it's awkward, and I don't know how big it is. I mean, it's a big fight. Don't get me wrong, but Brook against Mayweather would be, and I think very makeable one day.
Okay, Luke Groves. Quick question for Eddie. It's not quick. It's about 9 lines. With Eddie keen to write into performance-enhancing drugs into contracts of the Brook versus Porter fight, does he not think that the current system for testing is sufficient and up to date? How would he like it changed? And if it doesn't, how does he have anything personally in place to test his own athletes or give them more awareness of the situation?
Tickets. Performance-enhancing drugs is very, very important to address in boxing. Dangerous, firstly. Over here, we've got a really good system in place. You know, we've got random testing that tests fighters, turns up at their houses, knock on their door, will not leave. That's how you catch people. You catch people at the start of their camps, middle of the camps, even out of camps. The problem is with generally fights that I've been involved in America, there's testing on the night. It's a total waste of time. You know, these people are cheating. They cheat properly and they get it out of their system by then. The problem you've got in America is there's no governing body ruling the country. In England, Britain, you've got the British Boxing Board of Control. In America, you've got Nevada State Commission. You've got the New York Commission. You've got the New Jersey Commission. And they've all got different rules on testing. Do you know what I mean? And there's different agencies. There needs to be a universal agency that all fighters sign up to that randomly tests fighters in camp, out of camp, 2 weeks before a fight, 6 weeks before a fight. That's how you catch cheats. And I think we do it well here. I don't think it's a massive problem over here. There's always going to be people cheating. In America, I do think there's a problem.
Okay. Jordan Marr. Can you ask...
I know Jordan Marr.
Yeah, I do as well.
Scottish, I think.
Yes. Can you ask Eddie to name 3 British fighters in Britain he'd love to sign but are signed to other promoters?
It's going to cause a bit of aggro, that one. Right, we'll change the question a little bit. Not that I'd love to sign, but let's just say if a fighter became available,
yeah,
who would I be interested in signing?
Okay, I'm sure Jordan.
And I would say something like Tyson Fury, Chris Eubank Jr. I'll do a few. David Hay.
Khan,
yeah, you'd have to say Khan, big name. Bradley Saunders looks like a good young prospect.
Frampton.
Anyone that's a quality fighter, you have to think you'd have an interest in signing. I think we just named 5 or 6 quality fighters.
Okay. Finlay Anderson. Eddie, hearing rumours of Cleverly Belly pay-per-view. Surely not. You must have a Quigg Frampton type fight to justify pay-per-view for November 22nd.
Answer, it hasn't really been decided. What I'm trying to do with the fights I'm trying to put on, it could be pay-per-view, but if they can't be delivered, it won't be. And same, and since we've had the new pay-per-view system, Froch Kessler, Froch Groves 1, Froch Groves 2, we've always delivered. So if we do pay-per-view, it won't be Nathan Cleverly and like a couple of intercontinental fights. It'll be a big card, but it hasn't been decided yet.
Okay. Brandon Turner. I like this. It's a 10-question game. Rules are simple. Quick answers required. No fence sitting. You ready?
Yes or no? Or
Just know you answer either
Okay.
or. Cassius or Phelps? You're taking too long.
Phelps.
You're taking too long.
Phelps.
Kelly Maloney or Frank Warren in the ring?
Steady. But I ain't answering that. It's disgusting. Move on.
Oh yeah. You can't answer these
Come
questions.
on. Right,
I think they mean a fight.
Oh, okay, Kelly.
Brook beating Khan or Quigg beating Frampton?
Brook beating Khan.
Fernando Lugano or CJ Ross to judge Kell Brook?
Blimey. CJ Ross.
Eubank or Saunders?
Eubank.
Nelson or Huck?
Huck.
Ringside or the KUGAN CASSIUS show on Fight Pass?
Ringside. Oh, on Fight Pass. Oh, Fugan Cassius.
Listen. Take a slap from Joshua or Wilder.
Wilder. Joshua's a beast.
It's a big
That's good. Give him the
Yeah.
2 tickets.
Okay. Alan Wong. Has Alan Wong appeared before?
I think so.
Right. Now that Matchroom are number 1 in the UK, as they say, what goes up must come down. Look at Manchester United, for example. Has Eddie got a contingency plan for when the decline begins?
No, and the decline will. I mean, there's ups and downs in life, in business and in life. And just because we're number 1 now doesn't mean we're going to be number 1 in 3 or 4 years. We've got 2 more years to run on our Sky contract. That'll be extended probably next year, and we'll be good for 4 or 5 years. But it's not really about where we are. It's more about our desire to stay there. If we've always got the desire to be number 1, we'll stay there. Simple as that. We're too good not to, and we've got too many great fighters not to be number 1. But there'll be peaks and troughs in business and in life. So just roll with the punches. Always be smart. Always be thinking ahead. Have a great team. Keep working as many hours in the day as you can, and be just fine.
Okay. So I'm just going to turn my phone off it. No, we're off. So. Dave Murphy, Fast Car. Would it be possible to hold a Wimbledon-style day event where there are multiple rings, amateurs on the outer rings, and a larger main event in the evening? Day passes would be very affordable, and you can queue up for centre stage ticketing if you really want them.
No. Sorry. Nice idea, but logistically a nightmare. There's enough problems in boxing as there is.
Okay. Farhan Jahil. I've lately noticed that Joe Gallagher in his interviews mentions that Callum Smith is ready for Groves next year, but I've never heard you talk about this fight. So how far do you think personally Smith is before fighting for the likes of Groves? And by 2015, and from the current world champions in his weight class, who do you think he beats?
That's a good question. I would be happy for Callum Smith to fight George Groves next. I think it's a great fight. Joe Gallagher really fancies that fight. So does Callum Smith. Groves is a great fighter. I just think Callum's punch is too hard for him. He's got a long way to go. He's had 13 fights. Do you know what I mean? But he's showing wonderful promise. Who does he beat in the division? It's very difficult. Tough division. Does he beat Anthony Durrell? I mean, you have to say experience-wise, it's a really tough fight. Froch, Ward. You know, does he beat? I think he beats Abraham at the moment. But again, he'll be in an 8-rounder in Leeds on Saturday. Then November 22nd, a big fight on the Bellew Cleverley card that's going to be career-defining. Potentially a little bit early for that kind of phrase, but a very big fight for Callum Smith in his career.